Now, I know that I told you earlier and that I was going to be collecting your Works Cited pages later this week. Of course, you can't do a Works Cited page until I explain to you how to do one. So that's what this lesson is going to be all about. We are using what's called MLA format, the Modern Language Association. This is used in the humanities, the arts, for literature, for theater, for music. This is our area. Now you'll also hear about APA, which is psychology, and I think history uses that. And there are other versions out there. The Chicago style, which is used by journalist students. So you're going to run into a lot of different styles and formats out there. This is one of the easiest ones, and since literature, which technically this is considered a literature class, even though it's a writing class, we're going to use MLA. When you start to set up your citation page, normally we'll get to the last page of your essay, and then you're ready to type up the citation page. Now, ask your teacher which they prefer. According to MLA, you just start Works Cited immediately at the end of your essay. Most teachers actually prefer it on a separate page. So always check and see what your teacher wants you to do. I'm asking you to put it on a separate page. It's quicker and easier for me to check to make sure you did this correctly and then to verify it against the information in the rest of your essay. So that being the case, when you've reached the last page of your research essay, go to the Insert tab at the top of the page in Microsoft Word. So, you know that tab that runs across the top of the page, go up here and see where it says Insert. You click on that. And in the new opportunities that you have, there'll be this one over here that says Page Break. Go ahead and click on that. That'll create a brand new page. Now you're safe. You're in a new page, and whatever you do on this page will not affect previous pages. So you can change format without screwing up the rest of your essay. Now, start off by simply typing Works Cited. You have to use this as the title, not references, not sources, not bibliography. APA will ask, I think, for references or bibliography. I forget which one. But for this particular format, we want you to say Works Cited. And it's literally what you're doing. These are the sources that you are referring to, that's what cited means, in your essay. So that when I see the reference in your essay, I can flip back to this page and see what you're talking about. Now, once you've typed in Works Cited, hit the Enter key, start a new line. Now, back up, highlight Works Cited, and then make sure that you center it. So you want it at the center of the page. Then you can just use your little arrow key and pop back down to the next line, and you're not going to mess anything up because the next line has to be up against the margin. Now, you may have to go in and remove the existing tab. That's probably what's going to happen, is it's going to want to indent 5 spaces because that's what you were doing in your regular essay. Here you have to do what's called a hanging indent. So there's several ways you can do this. One is if you have the ruler open, you can just simply come up here and click on this little triangle and drag it back, and that will eliminate that tab. Or if you don't have the ruler open or you don't like playing with that, there's another way. Up here on the tab where it says paragraph, click on this little arrow here. That will open this drop box. You want to come over here to where it says special first line. Click on the arrow and get another drop box. And in this drop box, it currently should be saying first line. You don't want it to say first line. You want it to say hanging. So you're going to go here and see again where it says special. We are going to see, when we click on it, it will ask for the hanging tab. That's what you want to click on. So this will show up. Click on hanging. This little by box will say by 0.5. Don't worry about that. Make sure your spacing is double spaced and that you're at double zeros here. No, there's no extra space being added. Okay? Okay, that will set you up and you're all in hanging tabs. This is where a lot of people lose points, is they can't figure out how to do hanging tabs. So please make sure you know how to do this. Now, you're all set up. You don't have to worry about format anymore. So now you're going to list all your sources alphabetically, and the first entry on your sources should be an author's last name. If you don't have an author's last name, it will be the title of your source. So it's going to be one of those two. You go alphabetically that way. You start with numbers first, and then you go to letters of the alphabet A to Z. Do not break it up based on subjects like these were all magazines, these were my books, these were videos I looked at. No, don't break them up. Don't do them according. Here's all my authors, now here's all my titles, alphabetically by whatever that first word is on the line. Okay, MLA. Creating a works cited list. May have applied to many different types of meetings. Oh, okay. What's happened here, this is a little confusing. It used to be very easy to set this list up because primarily we're using books or actual magazines. We weren't doing anything online in the old days. So you had limited amount of information you could use. Now that everything's digital, now that everything's online, it's a lot more confusing. There's a lot more elements involved. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each of these elements one step at a time and try to clarify what they mean. Some are obvious and some are very confusing. There are 10 possible core elements for each citation. There's the author, that's the person. Notice I said person that wrote it, not a thing. It's not a corporation, it's not a business. Businesses can't write. There is a person that wrote it. The title of the source. Everything will have a title. Title of the container. Everything will have a container. These are the only two things that are guaranteed. Other contributors. Now here's where it could be a corporation or something like that. Other human beings. Version. That would be like the edition, the issue number. Then we look at the possibility of a publisher. Not everything has a publisher, but we're looking for who paid to have it put out there. The publication date. The location, where did you find it? You either found it online, which means you give me the URL, or you found it through the library's search engine, and then you'll explain to me what the search engine was. And then finally, this is not required, but often teachers will ask you to tell them the date you accessed it, because that, things online change a lot. So if we go in there and we look at it and it says, oh, well, this is very different than what he's saying, then I can go back and look and say, oh, well, it's been updated since the date he looked at it. So an author. Sounds pretty obvious. The person or organization that created the source. Now, I know I just said that an organization, a corporation, can't be an author. I'm going to hold off on that for 1 second. Remember that the author is a person or group of people, okay? So an organization can be an author when we're looking at it as a group of people, not an actual business, not a corporation. It's not the website. The website is not the author, okay? This will become clear in a moment. So you're going to start with the author's last name, followed by a comma. For this example, Jane Smith, you would write Smith, comma, Jane. Now, what if it was a group of people? Like here, the NASA Mars Committee. A committee is a group of people. Okay? NASA itself didn't write this. So you have to keep that in mind. Alright, I found it on the NASA website, but it doesn't have a person's name. Who actually wrote this? Well, you have to stop and think, which group, what subcommittee of NASA is involved in this, because NASA's huge. It covers a lot of different things. And the entire organization of NASA didn't write this little piece about why we should go to Mars. Alright, the title of the source. This is probably the easiest one to find. The name of the source always follows the author's name. If there's no author, then you start with the title. Okay? Book titles will be written in italics. Most of the time, I don't expect that you are using books. It's actually rare for people to use books these days. Everything else should be written with quotation marks around it. Okay? Other examples. An individual web page should be in quotation marks. you're going to be looking at the name of the... This is all so confusing. Oh, I see what it's saying here. Okay. Remember, I took all of this from... Let's go back a couple of things here. Previous. I took all this information from... Here. From the Purdue OWL website. So this is the most current information out there as to how to do this. So again, this still confuses me. A lot of the teachers get confused on this. We all do our best guesses on some of these things. So an individual web page. Okay, sometimes a web page is a title. That's what this is talking about. The name of the parent website as well as the name of the individual website are considered what we call a container. They should be listed in italics, not in quotation marks. So here we have Susan London wrote it. The title was How to Make Vegetarian Chili. Well, the container was eHow. That's a website. So that goes into italics. The publisher of a book would go into italics. The search engine would go into italics. Okay, so, and then, whoops, a song or piece of music on an album would be in quotation marks because it's a title. The name of the album would be in italics. What you have to think about here, and this is where it gets confusing, is you're starting with the most, the lowest level for the title. What is the closest thing to the individual title of the specific piece you're talking about? Then that specific piece was contained in a larger unit, which might be contained in another larger unit, which might be contained in another larger unit. That's where this gets confusing really fast. So when you're thinking about containers, you're going to think about how many things the source, how many levels you had to go through to get to the actual article that you are using for your source. For example, you may be looking at blogs or postings. Okay, the blog is the, and I hope you don't actually use blogs, but sometimes they're appropriate. So let's say you are using a blog. The blog is your individual title, but that blog was contained on Joey Smith's webpage, which was then contained under blogsanonymous.com, which is a website, which is then also sponsored by, so you just keep going till you reach the outermost level. Understand that Google should never show up on here. Google is a search engine. Google is not a container, okay? Google Books, however, is a container. Netflix is a container. So this can get confusing, and it will be, trust me. That's why we're going to take our time on this. Other contributors. These are people who helped create the source, but were not the actual writers, not the original authors. Okay, so they had a hand in it, but they're not the actual person that sat down and wrote the whole thing. So this could be someone who edited it. This could be somebody who did some research on it, somebody who translated it from another language, someone who drew pictures for it. There's a lot of people that can fall into this category. To be honest, this is not a very important category. Really, I wouldn't worry about it too much. The only time it becomes important is when you're using actually a book and it's an anthology with a bunch of different individual articles by individual writers. So you may have like 20 different authors with 20 different articles inside. The whole thing, the actual book itself, was put together by an editor. That's where this will come into play. For example, down here, well, this is a bad example. This is the person who wrote the book, Madness and Civilization, and then it was translated into English by Richard Howard. Let's say that Michael Foucault actually wrote Madness and Civilization, and it was an article, and that article was within a bigger book that was called The History of Insanity and the Age of Reason. And that would have been edited by Richard Howard. Yeah, I know you're probably shaking your head going, what? Okay. If there's more than one edition or version of a book, you have to identify that version. So, the Bible, this is the King James Version. There's about a dozen different versions of the Bible. This was the 3rd edition of this particular book. Notice the Oxford English Dictionary here is on its 2nd edition. Number, Okay? Usually this is going to apply to magazine articles. So what was the issue number of that magazine? But it can also apply to DVDs and different things like that. Publisher is only going to be used when you're using a book. Otherwise, forget the term publisher because it's confusing. We don't want to know the publishers of magazines and journals, newspapers, or databases. I can look those up if I really need to know what they are. Just telling me the name of the magazine is enough. Okay? Publication date. So for an article, it should be listed right at the very beginning. For a book, you'll find it inside on the title page. Often things have been listed for have been published several times. I want the most current version, so the most recent date. That's what you're going to tell me. You're going to tell me the most recent date of the one that you're using. If you're talking about television shows or movies or DVDs, you're going to list its original broadcast date on TV or its theatrical release date. And then if you're watching it on a DVD, you're going to give the date the DVD was produced. So for example, Star Wars was released in 1977. You have to tell me that. Then you're going to tell me who did the DVD. In this case, let's say Disney produced the DVD, and it was released in 2019. Because there's been probably 20 different releases of Star Wars on DVD. Which particular one were you watching? Okay, location. This is where you found the article inside its container. So, Donald Trump and the coronavirus. That's the name of our article. Where did you find it? Time Magazine. Okay, that's its original container. Now, you didn't actually go out and buy Time Magazine and sit at home and read it. You found it on the computer somewhere. So that's the next container. Did you find it on Time's webpage, so then it would be time.com? Or did you find it through a library search engine, which would mean you would then list Gale dot whatever. We're never going to say the HCC library because that's a location of a place that has a search engine, which it's so confusing, that took you to all this. So we're not going to worry about that. We're not worried about physical buildings. This is all very abstract. The date of access. Now, this is considered optional. This is the date you found it, not the date it was published. Okay? So when you were doing your research, that's the date you accessed it. So as you can see here, here's our author, here's our title, here is the web page that we found it on, here's the date that it was published on that website, here is the URL so that we can go back to it, and the date that I looked at it, May 9th, 2009. Now, word of caution. Citations provided by citation generators online are rarely 100% correct. You need to understand how citations work in order to verify that the citation generator provided the correct information. Now, what does all that mean? There's a thing called EasyBib and NoodleBib, and there's several other bibs out there. They will create your citation for you. It's all fine and good, except it's just a machine. It's a program. It can't think. It's only going to do what you tell it to do. It's only going to use the information that you plug in. So if you plug in the wrong information into the wrong spot, it's going to put it in the wrong spot. If you're giving it the wrong information, period, it's going to still say the wrong information. It's not foolproof. In fact, if anything, it's more likely to give you errors than it is to fix them. So you have to understand what your citation should look like before you use these bibs. These bibs do make it quick and easier because you say, I use the following source, and it will say, oh, well, here's the information that you need to give for that source. So this is what I'm going to explain to you next, is the different types of sources. So if you were using YouTube, it'll say, oh, YouTube, well, here's the information that you need. But it's just going to give you blanks. You still have to fill in those blanks. So you still have to understand what you're doing. It's not a perfect fix. Now, if you have a book, books are the easiest because this is how this whole thing started, was with books. Okay? You need to give the author, you need to give the title of the book. You need to tell me who published the book and the date it was published. Boom, you're done. That's all there is to a book. If your book doesn't have an author listed, then just skip author and start right with the title. If you have more than one author, you list the first author with the last and first name, but all the rest of the authors go first name last. Okay? And you only have to give about 3 authors. If you have more than 3 authors, don't worry about them. Then you just stop with the first one. So if you've got 4 or more authors, just give me the first one and don't bother with the rest. APA, God help you, will want every single author, and I have seen articles that had 13 authors. And yes, you must list them all in APA. MLA says, as long as we got the first one, we have the primary author, we can find it. Periodicals, this is what you will be using mostly. What went wrong with these little gray spaces? They're all supposed to be behind the numbers. But anyway, this is what you're going to be using primarily are periodicals. What's a periodical? It's a publication that comes out periodically. It might come out weekly, like a magazine. It might come out daily, like a newspaper. It might come out monthly. It might come out twice a year, like certain academic journals. It might come out once a year. But it does come out on a regular basis. Periodicals are the most complicated. You're going to start with the author. You're going to give me the title of the article. You are going to give me the title of the periodical. You're going to give me the issue number. And this may also have a version to it too. So it may be, I can't think here. Instead of saying issue number 12, it might say volume number 16, issue 2. Most of the time, you won't have a number, you'll have a publication date. But sometimes you'll have issue numbers as well. Academic journals will always have volume and issue numbers. Most magazines, like you would find in the supermarket, at a bookstore, will have just a publication date. Newspapers will just have a publication date. The location. This tells me where you found it. Now, if you're reading the actual magazine, if you have it in your hand, you're flipping the pages, we don't worry about the rest of this. We're done at publication date. However, if you're looking at it online, the location then becomes either the URL or it's the search engine. Okay? And if you're a search engine, then that's what this is, title of container. Okay? Whew, complicated, right? Here's an example. Bradford Plumer wrote it. The title of the article is Grand Canyon. It was published in New Republic, volume 238, number 4. The date was 2008. So evidently this only comes out once a year. And it was found on the Academic Search Premier search engine. So notice there's no URL given here because it was found on a search engine. Now if you had found this through Google, you would give me the URL. Websites. These are things usually that you find through Google. Okay. All of this information will be included, or should be included if you can find it. Let me put it that way. Unfortunately, usually what you're only going to find is the title of your article and the name of the web page. And that's usually about all you can find. You should often think twice if that's all the information you've got. If they're not willing to identify themselves as the writers of it, you really got to question how good this piece of information is. So, you're going to be looking for the author if you can find it. You're going to give me the title of the article, the publisher, which will be the website, or that particular web page, and then the website. You're going to give me the publication date, if you can find one, because most of the time websites don't give dates. The location, this would be the URL, and then the date you accessed it. Here's an example. Spider websites, that's what this sucker is. That was the title. Notice there's no author. Here's the web page, SciNet links. I don't have a publication date, but I go straight to the URL, and here's the day I found it. Okay? If you're doing an interview, which right now you probably won't be doing because we're not supposed to be talking to each other in person, although I'm doing an interview right now, but I'm doing it all over the internet. A lot more difficult than just sitting down with a person. If you do an interview, you give the last name and then the first name of the person who conducted the interview. So in this case, it's you. You conducted the interview. Then you write down personal interview with the person you interviewed. People like to flip-flop these. Give me the person interviewed and then give me their name. No, you did the interview. Your name comes first. And then you just give me the date the interview took place. If you're watching a movie, a film, or you're watching a DVD, you give the title of the movie, the director's name, just by DIR, period, and his first or her first and last name. If you have them, stars with top billing. Now that's usually if you're watching a drama or a comedy or a big special effects type thing. If you're watching a documentary, there are no stars. You have maybe the narrator, and that's it. But you give that, the performer or narrator, first and last names. Studio name, the year of release. Okay. The format, which would usually be either DVD or video or VHS, or you watched it streaming online, and then the date of that professional production or the date that you watched it online. Okay. YouTube video, this also works with streaming. Streaming, I still haven't found a very solid answer as to which way you go. You can do like Netflix on the previous version, or you can set it up the same as a YouTube video. Again, you provide as much of the information as you can find. The last name and first name of the person who actually made the video. The title they gave that video. Then you tell us that you found it on YouTube. Then the publisher would be the film studio or wherever it was originally posted. Odds are you're not going to find that. Odds are you're not going to find the name of the person who made the video. You might find the name of the person who posted the video, in which case you say posted by. Date posted, and you give me the URL. And YouTube is very nice. It gives you the URL right there. You just say share, and it pops right up for you. Here's an example of what your finished Works Cited page should look like. Notice Works Cited. It's centered. Everything else is a hanging indent. This is what hanging indent looks like. The first line is flush with the margin, and everything else is indented. Notice that it's all in alphabetical order. Babb, Baumgartner, Granderson, McLaughlin, Writer, and Reports, News, and Staff Service. Look, this is not a person. So you see, but it's a group of people. So sometimes that slips in there. Sometimes, remember also, you won't have an author. So if it started with the Kobe Bryant timeline, that would have been up here. Okay. Make sure your titles are in quotation marks and that every word in the title is capitalized. I know that right now they're posting these things online all over the place with only the first word capitalized. Until MLA's coordinators makes a decision on this, we're still going by the old-fashioned version that we capitalize every word in there. So far, none of the styles have changed how they're doing it. They're still doing it the old-fashioned way. I wouldn't be surprised, though, in the next 5 years that they don't change it and say, you don't have to capitalize titles anymore. If you want to investigate further, if you've got a question that wasn't covered on the slides here, or that I'm not really sure what the answer is, this is what I'm going to do if you ask me, is I'm just going to go to the Purdue University Online Writing Lab, also known as OWL. I'm going to click on this little baby, go straight to their webpage, and see what they have to say about it. So you can always check for answers here. If you have any questions, please feel free to call me or email me on Blackboard. Take care, stay healthy, and bye-bye.